everyone, welcome to StudyIQ English. Since 2025, there has been one big concern for Indian economy. It all started with US President Mr. Trump announcing an unexpected 50% tariff on all the exports from India. Now, before that, US was supposed to be a $48 billion export destination for majority of Indian labor-intensive segments, whether it be gems or jewelry, whether it be leather making, whether it be toy industry, textile, apparel, or you can talk about electronic goods. But then how did India respond? We know that the tariff was a complete breakdown of WTO, most favored nation protocol, and therefore India, rather than picking up an aggressive fight with the US in the form of cascading reciprocal tariff, in fact took the mid path. India now tried to diversify its FTA, free trade agreement, including some very deep integrations like SEPA, comprehensive economic partnership agreements with majority of countries across the world. Now, India is not just the fourth largest economy, but also it is regarded as a swing state, a country that believes in strategic autonomy and dehyphenation, that doesn't believe in taking a very pro-Western or a very pro-China or a pro-Russia stand. And therefore, in the last year, we saw multiple free trade agreements, starting from whether it was Australia to whether it was Netherlands, to whether it was New Zealand, to European Union, mother of all the trade agreements with EU. And recently we have signed a SEPA with Canada for further uranium import. Plus, India enjoys a SEPA, comprehensive economic partnership with Oman and UAE. India also has a strategic security defense dialogue with Saudi Arabia. Apart from that, now finally, when Mr. Trump has agreed to reduce the tariff from 50% to 18%, and as of now, US is imposing a uniform 10% tariff on almost all its trade partners. India has been believing in export diversification, and in this light of export diversification, we have also signed up to upcoming negotiations with countries like Philippines and Maldives. The difference is that with Philippines, India has signed a PTA, preferential trade agreement, but with Maldives, we are signing a free trade agreement. We just spoke about Maldives a few days before. During that discussion, we were talking about the Colombo Security Conclave. So can anybody tell me in the comment box as you're watching the video, in which year was the Colombo Security Conclave initiated? And can you tell me all the members of this body? Very interesting question, because ultimately initiatives like Colombo Security Conclave or IORA, or for that matter, India's principles of Sagar Mala, Mahasagar, all these have made India the net security provider in the Indian Ocean. So therefore, Maldives is a very important country, and we are signing an FTA with Maldives. What's the purpose behind both these type of agreements with Philippines and Maldives? The idea is to boost trade. The idea is to improve bilateral investment, research and development, and improve economic relation. Today, India believes in diversification. Now, please remember, this is export diversification. India wants an access to other markets apart from America, because US market was almost shut after the 50% tariff terror created by the US. So therefore, now we are diversifying export. But now as the Gulf War is going on in West Asia, as the Strait of Hormuz is closing down, India is already thinking about energy import diversification. And if you remember, the recently signed SEPA with Canada, where we are now importing uranium from Canada. Apart from that, also Russia, also Kazakhstan. And when it comes to LPG, LNG, we are now roping in many other countries outside the Gulf areas. Recently, we spoke about Norway. Recently, we spoke about West African countries. Now, all these are again energy import diversification, because for a country that believes in strategic autonomy, need-based diplomacy is the answer. There are no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies in economic and foreign policy relations. Dehyphenation is the best strategy. Now India is signing both these agreements, and already terms of reference have been signed, which are like blueprints, which are like sample processes which will lead to the larger agreement. And therefore, as I said, with Philippines, we shall have a PTA. With Maldives, we shall have an FTA. Ultimately, India and all these countries will agree to reduce tariffs on each other products. So therefore, how do we differentiate between a PTA and an FTA? You might get a question like that in UPSC Mains GS Paper 3 Economy. Multiple times I have discussed with you in the Hindu newspaper class that bilateral agreements can be from very narrow, very shallow to very deep. The example I gave you for one of the deepest integration as a regional bloc was European Union, and then there are multiple examples of shallow agreements too. Looking at PTA, PTA is the most shallow kind of bilateral agreement two countries can have with each other. Why? Because the name says preferential. It means there is a tariff reduction on selected items or selected goods or commodities. That's why it's called PTA. It's less comprehensive. It's not about joint research or development. It's not about people-to-people migration. It's not about joint production across defense, space, or other sectors. It's just about a benefit when it comes to trade in selected commodities. Hence the name PTA. Then we talk about FTA, Free Trade Agreement, which is way more comprehensive. Here two countries agree to provide each other tariff reduction into goods and commodities as well as services as well as bilateral investment, and hence the range is much broader here. It is about a full-scale trade cooperation, but when the partnership expands to include migration issues, R&D issues, joint production issues across space or defense or agriculture, semiconductor, then it becomes a CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which India has recently signed with Oman. We already have one with UAE. We are signing one with Canada now. That's extreme integration called CEPA. Now coming back to India, Philippines, yes, both have quite established bilateral relationship. For example, if you look at the data, then between India and Philippines, exports to Philippines from India increased by 3.11% to $2.16 billion back in 2025. And if you talk about imports, then imports from Philippines are declining to about 1.17 billion during the same period. Now, if exports are much higher, we can safely claim to have a trade surplus with Philippines. Now, if you look at both the countries, but whatever, despite the trade surplus that favors India, both the countries have had a very steady trade growth in the last few years, and now a more broader PTA is being signed up for. The location of Philippines you can see right here in the map. Do not forget, this is the area from South Asia where we keep talking about so many related aspects. Say for example, we recently spoke about Indonesia, Malaysia. I had discussed strategic choke point, Strait of Malacca, Sunda Strait. Now you must know all these choke points, and you also must know which two water bodies are they actually connecting. So here's Philippines, and now if you move towards Maldives, the country whom we always mention as we talk about Colombo Security Conclave, with Maldives we are doing a proper FTA. India has started negotiating in that direction. If you look at the data given from government sources, then India exported to Maldives a significant amount of share, but the total export have fallen by 31.11%. And if you look at the imports from Maldives, they have in fact increased by 31.14%. That's to $118.82 million. Now, could this mean in future we are looking at the prospect of a trade deficit with Maldives? Now that's something that's not clear, and these are exactly the terms of reference that the Indian government right now is negotiating upon. Now with regards to Maldives, let's not forget the location you can see right here. Yes, as you are looking at the Indian Ocean region. Now we keep talking about how India is also not just the leader of the global south, but also the net security provider in the Indian Ocean. There is a reason why India maintains an integral position in the quadrilateral dialogue to protect Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean from China's monopoly. At the same time, India also believes in security, transparency and law in the Indian Ocean. Recently, there was a very disturbing news as US had sunk a submarine, a warship that belonged to Iran. That's called Iris Dena. At that point, a lot of people were questioning India's role as a net security provider because this ship was a part of Indian naval exercise called Exercise Milan, and suddenly it was sunk. What does that mean? At that time, the episode happened in Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone, but then it also highlights what role is India playing today in rescue and humanitarian assistance operations in the entire Indian Ocean. So therefore, Maldives is a very critical segment of the Indian Ocean countries. We often talk about IORA as well. Now, if you look at why does India suddenly need to have so many new FTA partners? Since 2025, multiple trade agreements are being signed. The reasons are very clear. We know that it's not safe to trust only one country as your export destination. Why? Because we can safely look at the example of Gulf countries right now. After experiencing a shock from US in the form of 50% tariff, which had impacted Indian imports significantly, the next shock comes in the form of US versus Iran war. Now, Gulf is a major area for India when it comes to foreign remittance income. It's a major area that provides not just employment to Indian professionals in the white and blue collar segment, but also a domain where India sends its exports to. It's a big export market for Indian products, but today the war means reduction of export volume, and hence it's much better to have a diversified basket of export rather than just putting your confidence in one or two countries. Therefore, India needs to protect exporter interests. That's one. Another, India must balance its trade deficit, like, as I said, we are negotiating in the case of Maldives. Expand global trade partnership. Reduce dependence only on existing blocs like ASEAN. Now, talking about ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, we know this is by and far the largest known FTA in the world. Not just certain Asia-Pacific countries, but also major countries of South Asia are participating here. And the most common platform that we talk about here is RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Platform. If you remember, India had walked out of RCEP in 2019. Why? Because India was experiencing a trade deficit, and trade with RCEP meant a loss to India's sensitive sectors like dairy and agriculture. So today the same theme is echoing. Because we want to maintain a trade positive surplus, because we want to have diversified export markets, that's why India is busy signing so many FTAs and PTAs right now. Now, looking at how many nations have India recently done its free trade agreements with, so we can say GCC. It was in the news, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Now, this area right now is infamous because of the war that's ongoing, especially Strait of Hormuz. But with GCC countries, India signed an FTA. With Canada, a very big free trade agreement. In fact, it's called SEPA. Especially, India will now obtain uranium. That's very important for us because we don't have enriched uranium ores in India. India has thorium, but not so much uranium. But now Shanti Bill means more uranium demand. So yes, that comes from Canada. Then with Australia, indeed it was about rare earth materials, critical minerals, and with Israel into water management and sustainable agriculture. So you see, these are the wide range of FTAs India has signed. A very good strategy again points out to dehyphenation. A quick practice question here. Consider the following statements. 1. A PTA eliminates tariff on all goods and all goods traded between two countries. An FTA generally covers trade in services and investment along with goods. And 3. Terms of reference define the scope and framework of trade negotiations. It's a very easy question. Try to answer and share your responses in the comment box. If you want such related information nuggets every day, which will help you in your exam, then you can download this QR code and become a part of our Telegram community, our channel. And do remember, at StudyIQ right now, we are offering massive discounts for batches for 27 and 28 UPSC. Prices are as humble as 13,999, and if you enroll for both these batches, whether 27 or 28, by using my code SPLIVE, then maximum discount on the top of this price. But remember, batches are beginning on 26th March for both 27 and 28 batch. So enroll today. In return, enjoy a 360-degree comprehensive preparation strategy for the UPSC exam. Thank you.